Hello everyone, welcome back. Another week down, and it's been a very interesting week this week. We've got a fair bit more done on BA1, more so to do with the back end, and we've learnt a hell of a lot. So we'll cover all that off now. There's been some really cool engineering that we've uncovered, which was hidden under the dirt. And we'll also have a look at some footage of this car at some not so good times. So we'll hook into it now. This is the very latest from the workshop. So as we alluded in last week's video, we're going to have a bit more of a look at the back of BA1 and start to service everything up. Now everything here is a complete mess, which you'll see pretty quickly. Because it's all covered by the fuel cell and the way the car was built, it's really difficult to get to. So we're going to get in here and have a good go at cleaning everything up, given that the fuel cell's currently out. Now, I've had a lot of questions about the Watts link and people wanting to have a bit more of a look at it. I'm not an expert in this, so anyone that can explain it better than me, go for it. But the Watts linkage in the back of the car is one of the main tuning devices, or one of the many tuning devices in setting one of these cars up. So you've got your two arms, which go to each corner of the diff, and it moves obviously keeps the diff from moving side to side, keeps it stable. And you've got a center pivot point. Now, when you move that center pivot point up, it increases the resistance to body roll, effectively stiffens the car up. So it gives you a lot more turn at the front. And when you lower the bolt and change the pivot point again, it softens the car off and it gives you a lot more drive. So effectively, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it's a way that you can adjust the car's body roll and characteristics. Now, if we come out from underneath the boot and have a look here, that's the Watts linkage out of FTR3. Now that's more your conventional setup. The super cheap AU runs exactly the same system. So it's a triangular shape. That's what most of the cars had, or this kind of layout back in the day. And to adjust it, it's just got a bolt straight through the center of it. And on the other side, it's got a nut. So to adjust that, it's not something you can quickly do during a pit stop. Let's change the way I hold this camera here. So you need to undo that. You can slide that into whatever position you want, do it up, and away you go. That washer there is what holds it all in place. That's currently set in a fairly neutral position, being pretty well dead center. Now, if we come back over to BA1, you can see the layout of the Watts linkage is a little bit different. The operation's the same, but it's a completely different way of thinking. So you'll see here, it's only half a triangle. It's the first thing you'll notice. What Stones have done is they've pushed it forward, which we said last week, and it's built into the diff housing. So there's absolutely no room to move. Every millimetre's being utilised, and that's to bring the fuel cell forward and bring your balance of the chassis, level everything up a bit better. Now, the adjuster point in the center, it doesn't have those two washers to clamp everything together once you've made your adjustment. That slides up and down in a groove, and it's got an adjuster point at the top. So it's got a cable that comes in. Now this cable, you can switch between the left or the right-hand side of the car next to the air spike. It's obviously different racetracks around Australia. You fill your air spike and your fuel point are at different sides. So that's fully adjustable as well. And when you turn that cable, it's got a 3/8 bit on the end of the cable, a 3/8 socket here, and that is threaded where it goes into the box section that runs along here. So that moves up and down on that thread, which if you come all the way down, moves that point up and down. So it's incredibly clever, and what holds that in place is the cable and the resistance of all that. It doesn't actually jam it up solid. So if you do want to give it a couple of turns during a pit stop, if you're chasing drive or turn in the chassis, you can do that without having to unbolt everything. Now, it looks pretty simple on the outside, but you have a look in there, and as I said, excuse the mess and the state of it. It needs to be all serviced up. But so make sure everything can turn freely. There's uni joints. There's all sorts of stuff in there. There's bearings. there would have been a lot of work going to this. So I'm going to pull all this out and have a bit more of a look and certainly clean it. You don't have to be blind Freddy to see that that hasn't been moved for a long time and it's all seized up. So we'll get all that out. But again, quite a simple idea, but there's just a hell of a lot of work that's gone in to make it work, which is another reasons why these cars were so successful. So we're going to pull the watch linkage out of the car. So there's mounting bolts along the top. You've got your mounting points to your diff. So theoretically, it shouldn't be too bad to get out of the car. Now, I've just spent the last little bit trying to work out how this cable's mounted in, thinking there must be a roll pin or a clip or something holding it in. No, it's pretty basic. I overthought it. It's just got a couple of cable ties. The cable's tied to this bar because that outer cable doesn't move, the inner does. And with those cable ties cut, bit of a wiggle, out it comes. So that's just a 3/8 hex drive, and that's a 3/8 obviously keyway there. Now the good news is with that cable out of there, if I put a 3/8 Allen key in there, all of a sudden that now moves. So just to give you a bit of a demo how it works, you're turning the cable. And by turning that, just by hand, you can see, I'll stop wobbling the camera everywhere, you can see that that is slowly moving that pivot point down. So it's, yeah, really cool piece of engineering, and you can certainly see why Stone Brothers led the way back in the day. This cable here is seized, and that's why it's not adjustable from the cab at the moment. So you can hear how crunchy that is. So we'll start stripping everything out of here and see what's underneath. So the watch linkage is out of the car, and as you can see, it's opened it right up, so we can see a lot more of what's going on under here. It's unearthed a few little issues like that oil temp sender on the diff. It's worn the boot off the back of it, and I doubt very much whether that still reads, but yeah, we'll get in here and have a good tidy up of everything. Again, just lots of dirt and grit, and it's built up over a long period of time. We'll be able to drop the oil tank out as well for the engine. We'll clean all that out and obviously clean up everything else under here. Now the watch linkage is sitting over here on the trolley. As you can see in a bit more light, it does need quite a bit of work, and we'll get into that now. We'll open it up and see what we can find. So the watch linkage is all pulled apart, so we'll start cleaning everything up now and documenting it all as we go. A lot of the bolts are different lengths, so I've got to make sure that everything goes back in exactly the right order, because we don't want anything to catch or foul, and I can't get an owner's manual for this kind of stuff, so I've got to document it all and do it once, do it properly. That's the inside of the watch linkage plates, so they haven't been apart for a long time. So we'll start getting some solvents and that out. We'll clean everything up and see how it looks once we're done. Okay, so that's starting to look a bit more like it. So everything's been hand scrubbed and cleaned and you name it, it's been done. So it's all ready to go back together. Couple of things. It's got on the top of this main segment in the middle here, it's got hand engraved in there, RS59. Not too sure what that means, but it's hand engraved, not stamped, so it's there for a reason. And this uni joint that we were talking on the shaft where you can adjust the watch link, the uni joints, if I spin that around, a snap-on 1/4-inch drive uni joints out of a socket set. So again, make it work and make it work properly. So it's pretty cool how they've come up with that theory and made it work. We've put a new rose joint on one of the rod ends, and also a new bearing in here as well. So everything's ready to go back in. We're going to throw it back together tonight. It's not going to go back in the car straight away. I'm putting it back together tonight while it's fresh in my mind where everything goes. And once that's done, we'll throw a cover over it and we'll start cleaning up the boot, because the next step is to try and make the boot I guess to the same level of, I'll get it presentable basically. So we'll hook into this and get it all ready so we can start putting it back together. The Supercars Championships raced at Darwin this weekend, so I thought I'd have a quick look back and just see how BA1 fared at the Hidden Valley circuit. 2004, it took a race win after Mark Skaife and Marcus Ambrose came together on the last lap. But in 2003, it was a totally different story. The car had a massive hit in race one off the line. It had contact with Greg Murphy and it ended up in the fence pretty hard, damaging the front and rear end. It was one of the many big hits this car had when it was new. It had a massive hit at Phillip Island, again at Hidden Valley. So a lot of the damage that this car sustained that was notable happened in 2003, where 2004 was more of a straightforward run. So I'll have a look at that now, and I'll push on here tonight, and we'll have more for you next week when we progress further. Thanks again for your support.
Yes, nobody has ever won the overall round in Darwin after starting from position number 1. But Skaife is certainly on the way after race 1. And from the get-go, controversy yesterday. Russell Ingall speared off in a tangle that once again put Greg Murphy in the frame. Now, from the available angles that we have, it's hard to tell exactly what happened or who hit who, but you can see the resulting mess. And the net result was a badly bruised BA Falcon for Ingall and the end of race 1 for the Enforcer. This is the view from inside the cockpit of Greg Murphy's car. Up on the left comes car number 9. Big, bad, messy stuff. We'll have more on this shortly when we get into pit lane and find out what all the wash-up was, but we can see what the result was for Russell Ingall. And that is Greg Rust.
Matthew, a hearing was conducted straight after that race 1 incident, and in fact stewards reconvened first thing this morning. Now they found a lack of evidence to suggest that either driver had moved. Stephen Ellery was called in to table additional evidence, so too was Craig Lowndes, and Lowndes in fact is adamant that Russell did not deviate from his line and that more could have been done to prevent that incident. Boy oh boy, the clash of the two competitive personalities, both Russell and Greg Murphy. It's not the first time it's happened this year. It happened at the Adelaide 500. Russell stripped of a podium, but Murph finds himself at the centre of controversy again. The wash-up is that Murphy will start from position 6. Russell off the back of the grid as we get set to go racing. Darryl?
Thanks, Greg. Well, yesterday's sprint